Hey everyone, DisturbedShadow here, finally bringing you the next album in the In Flames discography. Today we're finally talking about their 10th album entitled Sounds of a Playground Fading. Now before I actually get into the review, I do want to mention a few things. One is that this is the first album they've recorded since their founding member, the lead guitarist, Jesper, left the band. Like there were some disagreements with the direction of the band or something like that. Anyway, he left the band and then they uh, recorded this album with just one guitarist. Björn was the only guitarist to actually record guitars on this album. But that's one of the things I want to mention. The other is that in an interview about the album, Anders actually said that they were trying new things with this album, and had some songs that were pretty much going against the hard rock formula, and that there would be reduced screams and growls and stuff like that. So I kept that in mind going into this album, even though I've heard this many, many times before. I kept that in mind while I went and thinking about specifically what I was going to talk about in the specific tracks. So now let's go in and jump in and talk about some of my personal favorite tracks in the album. So first let's talk about the opening track, the title track, Sounds of a Playground Fading, which I think is a perfect way to introduce this album. It starts off with a kind of slow melodic thing, and then the distorted guitars come in, the bass comes in, and then the drums come in, and then it just gets heavy, and then they bring in that big, chuggy, powerful riff to really showcase what they're doing with this album, and then the bass is really heavy in the song. It's not really doing anything interesting, but it's there, and it's really thickening up the sound of the guitars and stuff like that, and it just makes it have this really beefy sound to it. Plus, in the middle of the song, instead of a solo, they do this cool thing where they have the bass and the rhythm guitars going on. On top of that, they've got a slower, like, melodic thing, and then on top of that, they've got another faster melodic guitar part on top of that, and it has this really cool. It just sounds really cool the way that all those different tracks come together on the song. The second track I want to talk about is the lead-off single, "Deliver Us," which is it's another cool song. It starts off with this cool synthy stuff, and then the guitars come in, and there's lead harmonized guitars on this, and then it blends in really well with the synth on top of that, and it just sounds cool, just layered together like that. Plus, this is one of those songs that has a really catchy chorus that just pulls you right into the song and makes you want to sing along. And I've seen them perform this song live on two different occasions, and it's a song that really gets the crowd going, and then they're all singing along with the chorus because it's just the way the melodies, the vocal melodies, and it just make you want to sing along with it. Next song I want to talk about is track number 4, entitled "The Puzzle," which is a song that it didn't really stand out on the guitars and on the vocals as much, but there's a lot of cool stuff happening on the rhythm section. Like Daniel's doing some really cool stuff on the drums in this song that really sort of caught my ear. He's doing some more kind of complex technical kind of stuff, and then the bass is very noticeable in the song. And then at the end of the song is actually a cool part where the drums and the bass sort of take the lead, and then there's sort of layers of guitar and synth sounds on top of that. But the basses and the drums are the primary focus on that part of the song, and I think that's a cool way to close out that song. Next song I want to talk about is track number 5, "Fear is the Weakness," which is another song that has a cool lead guitar sound to it, and then there's effects on it that make it sound cool, and it's worked in well with the synths that are in the background of the song. And this is a song that has a really cool chorus where Anders is singing and the rest of the band is doing backing vocals behind that, and it's sort of the way the layered vocal tracks come together. It just sounds really good. And overall, it's a chorus, another one that makes you want to sing along with it. And it's got a pretty cool solo in the middle of the song as well, so that's another good thing about the song. Track number 7, I do want to mention this, is entitled "The Attic," and I don't really see the point of this song. It's sort of slow, weird guitar things, and then Anders is doing this weird whispery singing thing, and it's just a short and weird track, and I don't know, the lyrics are kind of weird too. I just don't really see the point of the song. It doesn't seem to really fit in with the rest of the album, but it's not really that bad of a song, but I just don't see why it's even on the album in the first place. But overall, I think there's enough other good tracks that counteract that. Track number 8, "Darker Times," which is the heaviest song on the album, and it's got a lot more screaming on it than a lot of the other songs, because as I said, Anders said he didn't do as much screams and growls and tried other different vocal styles. but this is a song where he does keep up the more harsh vocal sound. And then it's another one that has a really catchy chorus that makes you want to sing along with it, which is something they did really well across all the songs on this album. And then there are not one but two guitar solos on this song. One's sort of a little short thing, and then there's one that's a bit longer and more typical guitar solo length. And I don't know, the way that they have the two solos in two different parts of the song sort of breaks up the song nicely. So it's not the typical verse, chorus sort of structure. Track number 9, Ropes, which has a really, really, really cool melodic lead guitar intro riff, and then outro riff is the same one. And then Anders is doing a more clean vocal style. Like, he sings on most of these songs, but it's a bit like, it's sort of a gruff screaming. It's kind of, there's a little bit of growl in the scream, but on this song he does for the more melodic type of singing. And it just sounds really good on the song, and it's cool that he mixes up his vocal style a bit from the different from track to track. And this is a track where his vocal style is a bit more unique than on other songs. Track number 11, Jester's Door, is another weird song. I just felt sort of was out of place on this song. And it kind of reminds me of, I don't remember what it was called, but the track at the end of Come Clarity that was sort of weird and kind of a weird, disappointing song to have for the close of the album. But it's sort of like that, and then it doesn't really, it has weird like synth sounds and like sample drum beats and stuff like that. And it's just a little bit of spoken word part in the middle of it. It's just kind of weird. And again, I don't really see the point of this song, even much more than The Attic. And it sort of breaks up the flow of the album in a weird way, and I don't really think they should have included it, but it doesn't take away from the album that much. It's just kind of a weird inclusion on this album. Track number 12, A New Dawn, which is another song that really showcases that Anders can still do screams and growls and stuff like that. And he on the verses he gets really heavy with the vocals, and then he pulls it back to a more melodic thing during the choruses. On this song, I also want to note that there's a lot of cool drum stuff happening. That Daniel's doing this stuff where in the verses he's more pulled back, as it's like a heavy chugging sort of riff, and then when the chorus opens up with the big melodic singing guitars and stuff like that, where he comes in really heavy with doing all sorts of crazy stuff on the drums to sort of mix it up from the other parts of the song. Also, in this song, there's a part in the middle where it slows down and the drums sort of go on the back burner, and it emphasizes clean guitars and melodic guitar playing. And then there's like a string section in the background over that sounds really cool, and it comes together in a nice way. And then they refrain back to the way the song started in the beginning, and then they go back to the chorus, and they end it. And just the way the song progresses is really cool. And finally, track number 13, Liberation, which I really think is the song that Anders was referring to when he said they have songs that go against the hard rock formula. This song is very, very different than previous stuff that In Flames has done before, where the guitars are more pulled back and they're not really distorted as much, and it just sounds clean, and the bass is simplified, the drums are pulled back, and Anders is doing this very melodic type of singing with not a lot of the grit that is apparent on all the other songs. And it's a very slow song. It's very personal in terms of lyrics, but again, it's one that does make you want to sing along. And I think it's an interesting way to close out the album, where they pick a very much slowed down song to end it. And while the song is very different from what they've done before, I think it's a very good song, and it's one of the better tracks on the album. And like I said, it's an interesting, but it's still a very, very good way to end this album. So now let's go on and talk about the band members themselves. So first, let's talk about Björn on guitars, because he does a fantastic job on his own without Jesper. And I think even this album, guitar-wise, is much, much better than their previous offering, which was A Sense of Purpose, which didn't feel like it gave a lot in terms of the actual guitars, and they seemed to not really do any guitar solos and not a lot of melodic type of stuff, and it was very much more focused on synths and stuff like that. But this album, Sounds of a Playground Fading, is a much more guitar-centric album, and you can really hear that throughout the whole thing, where Whereas A Sense of Purpose didn't have like any guitar solos, this album has a lot more. While they're not as like crazy or complex as solos they did on their earlier albums, like on Clayman or Colony or the Jester race, they are very good solos. They're simple. They're more simplified and they fit well with the direction they went with on this album. Plus, like I said, there's a lot more melodic guitar riffs and stuff like that that showcase Bjorn's guitar playing, and I think he did a really good job of doing all this guitar stuff on his own without Jesper, who was one of the main contributors to In Flames' writing, and of course he was the founding member of the band, but they did a good job without him. Now let's talk about Peter on bass. There's a lot of parts where the bass is sort of just going along with what the guitars are doing, but even when it's doing that, his bass is turned up nice and loud, and it really serves to make the riffs just sound that much heavier. So he did a good job on bass on those songs. And then there are songs where he does a little more interesting things, like on like Where the Dead Ships Dwell, which is a song I forgot to talk about, which I'll briefly mention. That's a more slowed down song, and it's got some cool synths on it. But the one complaint I have about it is that there's a part where it transitions into a guitar solo where that transition's a little weird, but once it's actually in the guitar solo, the song's really good, and it transitions back out of the solo very well. Now back to what I was talking about in this song, where the bass sort of stands out in this song, where the guitars sort of fall back and Peter is more hearable, and you can tell that he's doing interesting stuff on this. And then there's other songs like on Darker Times and Ropes where the bass really shines through again, and you can definitely hear what he's doing, and that he's doing something different from what the guitars are doing. And then Daniel on drums, like I say, on every In Flames album that he's been on, he does a fantastic job on drums. And he doesn't really get into anything too repetitive or stuff like that. A lot of metal drummers do, where they do this simple thing where they just throw in blast beats and double bass and stuff like that. But he keeps things mixed up consistently throughout this album, where he's doing more pulled back drumming on songs like Where the Dead Ships Dwell or A New Dawn, where he's more pulled back, or on Liberation as well, where he does the more pulled back style, which fits with what the songs are. And then there's more crazy songs like Ropes or Darker Times, where the drums really stand out, and that you can tell that he's doing stuff that's really complex and interesting, that keeps the rhythm, but also keeps the listener entertained and not just keeping time. And finally, let's talk about Anders on vocals. Anders does a really good job on this album with all his different vocal styles, where he's doing the more gruff sort of singing like on Deliver Us or Enter Tragedy, or songs like that where it warrants the more gruff singing, or songs like Ropes or A New Dawn or Liberation, where he does the more melodic type of singing. And then there are parts where he does go back to his more screamy, growly stuff like on A New Dawn or Darker Times, or on the title track, where he's doing more heavier kind of vocals. And the way he switches between all these different styles works really well, and on the songs that do feature multiple singing styles, that transitions between them very well to keep the songs more interesting. So Anders does a very good performance of vocals. It's not his best, but he definitely does a really good job, and I think he does do a better job than their previous offering, which was A Sense of Purpose. So overall, I think this album is a much better album than A Sense of Purpose was, and I think it was a step in the right direction. Even though A Sense of Purpose was still a really, really good album, this album is just that much better. And I do want to mention that A Sense of Purpose had a lot more songs that just stood out as on their own as particular songs, like The Mirror's Truth or Alias or Delight and Angers, but overall the album as a collective wasn't as good as this one, but the individual songs themselves stood out compared to individual songs on or Sounds of a Playground Fading. But Sounds of a Playground Fading overall is a better album as a whole than A Sense of Purpose was. So overall, I think, like I said, it's a better album, but that doesn't necessarily mean that A Sense of Purpose was a bad album. But I really think Sounds of a Playground Fading was a good step in the right direction from what they were doing there, where they brought back their guitars stronger, because they sort of went synthy on the previous album. But this album does get me excited to see what they're doing with Siren Charms, which does come out later this week, and I will be reviewing that on release date because I'm finally getting caught up with my reviews. So I will see you guys later this week when I review Siren Charms and complete the In Flames discography. So see you guys then.